There is a moment. It happens quickly, almost invisibly. Someone says, "You did an amazing job," or "You look beautiful today," or "I am really proud of you." And for a split second, something tightens inside you. Before the polite smile appears, before the laughter, before the reflexive, "Oh, it was nothing," your body reacts. A slight heat in the face, a subtle stiffness in the shoulders, an urge to redirect the attention somewhere else. Why? On the surface, it looks like modesty. It looks socially graceful to downplay praise. It even sounds humble. But inside, it does not feel like humility. It feels like exposure, as if someone has pulled a curtain back and revealed something you were not ready to show. As if their words have illuminated a part of you that feels fragile, unsteady, uncertain. Compliments are meant to affirm. So why do they sometimes activate discomfort? Because praise is not just information, it is attention. And attention, for many people, has never felt entirely safe. The nervous system does not separate good attention from bad attention the way logic does. It simply registers intensity. A spotlight is still a spotlight, even when it shines warmly. For some, being seen positively creates a strange vulnerability. It raises questions the mind has quietly been avoiding. Do they really mean it? What if they expect more now? What if I cannot live up to that image? So you deflect. You minimize. You say, "It was not that great," or "Anyone could have done it," or "You are just being nice." It sounds polite, but internally, it is protective. Because accepting the compliment would mean allowing the possibility that it might be true. And that possibility can feel destabilizing when your internal narrative does not match the external praise. If you have spent years focusing on your flaws, measuring yourself against impossible standards, or preparing for criticism rather than appreciation, then a compliment does not land softly. It collides. It presses against an identity that has been carefully constructed around self-correction and vigilance. In that moment, there is a subtle dissonance. Their words say, "You are enough." But your inner voice whispers, "Not quite." And so the flinch happens. Not because you dislike kindness, not because you want to reject connection, but because being seen in a positive light feels unfamiliar. And unfamiliar things, even good ones, can feel unsafe. Some people are comfortable under praise because they have practiced receiving it, and others have practiced bracing. The flinch is not arrogance. It is not insecurity in its loudest form. It is a quiet reflex, a learned response, a moment where your nervous system whispers, "This is new territory," and new territory can feel like risk. So you smile, you deflect, you move the conversation along. But beneath the smile, something remains unsettled. A small question lingers. What would happen if you simply said, "Thank you," and let it stay there? Where did this discomfort begin? Compliments do not become heavy on their own. They gather weight over time. Often, long before you had the language to understand what was happening. In some homes, praise was rare. Achievement was expected, not celebrated. Doing well was simply what you were supposed to do. No applause. No pause. Just the next expectation waiting quietly around the corner. In other homes, praise came with conditions. You were told you were smart, but only when your grades were high. You were called responsible, but only when you carried more than your share. Love and approval felt tied to performance, and so your worth began to feel negotiable. Something to earn, something that could be withdrawn. Sometimes praise was followed by pressure. You did so well. Now do it again. You are the strong one. Do not disappoint us. You are the talented one. Do not waste it. The compliment was not a resting place. It was a staircase, each step higher, each step narrower. For some, attention itself felt unsafe. Being noticed meant being judged. Being praised meant becoming visible. And visibility meant vulnerability. And if you grew up in an environment where mistakes were magnified, where criticism was sharp, or where emotional warmth was inconsistent, your system may have learned to stay guarded. Inconsistent validation creates confusion. One day, you are appreciated. The next day, you are ignored. Or worse, compared. Compared to a sibling. Compared to a classmate. Compared to someone who seemed easier to love. Over time, you may have learned to distrust positive words. They felt temporary, fragile, unreliable. So when someone compliments you now, the past quietly leans forward. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to whisper, "Be careful." Because somewhere along the way, praise stopped feeling like connection and started feeling like risk. Risk of higher expectations. Risk of losing approval. Risk of being seen and then criticized. And the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. The nervous system stores emotional patterns like sediment at the bottom of a river. You may not see it on the surface, but it shapes the current. So when someone says, "You are incredible," it is not just about this moment. It is about every moment before it. Every time you were told to do better. Every time you were noticed only when you excelled. Every time affection felt earned instead of given. And so you shrink the compliment. You lower it to a size that feels manageable. Not because you crave invisibility, but because invisibility once felt safer than the weight of expectation. It is not that you do not want appreciation. It is that your system is still learning that appreciation does not have to come with strings attached. At its core, the discomfort is not really about the compliment, it is about identity. Every person carries an internal image of who they believe they are. Not the polished version shown to the world, but the quieter self-concept built from years of experiences, feedback, failures, and private thoughts. This self-concept becomes familiar, even when it is harsh, even when it is limiting. It becomes home. So what happens when someone offers you a compliment that does not fit that internal image? Something subtle but powerful occurs. A psychological tension known as cognitive dissonance. When external feedback clashes with internal belief, the mind feels friction. If you secretly believe you are not that competent, and someone calls you brilliant, the brain does not immediately upgrade your self-image. It questions the compliment instead. And they are exaggerating. They do not see the full picture. If they knew the real me, they would not say that. This is not stubbornness, it is coherence. The mind prefers consistency over positivity. It would rather maintain a stable negative belief than adopt a positive one that feels uncertain. Because changing self-perception requires dismantling old narratives. And old narratives, even painful ones, feel predictable. There is a strange comfort in familiar self-criticism. It may hurt, but it makes sense. Praise, on the other hand, can feel like standing on unstable ground. If you accept the compliment, you must also confront the possibility that your long-held self-doubts may not be entirely accurate. And that can be disorienting. Who are you without the story that you are always lacking? Who are you without the constant internal correction? Identity is powerful. It filters what you allow in. Some people struggle to accept compliments not because they lack worth, but because worthiness has never fully integrated into their self-concept. The compliment floats at the surface, but it cannot sink in. It is like pouring clear water into a cup already filled with sediment. The water enters, but the cloudiness remains. So you reject it, or reinterpret it, or quickly return to safer territory by pointing out your flaws. Because flaws are familiar. They do not challenge the narrative, and the narrative feels safe. even when it keeps you small. Accepting a compliment is not just about saying thank you. It is about allowing a new possibility of self to exist. And for someone whose identity has been shaped by self-doubt, that possibility can feel overwhelming, not because it is wrong, but because it is new. Sometimes the discomfort is not about disbelief, it is about pressure. A compliment can feel like a promise you never agreed to make. You did an incredible job. You are so talented. You always handle things so well. The words sound warm, encouraging, kind, but beneath them, another message can quietly form. Now you have to keep being that person. Now you have to maintain that standard. Now you cannot fall short. Praise can raise the ceiling. And higher ceilings can feel intimidating when you are already afraid of falling. For someone who ties their worth to performance, a compliment does not signal rest. It signals responsibility. It is not a moment to breathe. It is a moment to brace. Because if you accept the compliment fully, it can feel as though you are accepting an invisible contract. A contract that says you must continue to impress, continue to succeed, continue to embody the image they now hold of you. And what if you cannot? What if the next attempt is average? What if you disappoint them? What if the image cracks? So the mind protects itself in advance, by minimizing the praise, by downplaying the success, by lowering the perceived height of the achievement. If it was not that impressive, then there is less to lose. If you insist it was luck, then you are not responsible for repeating it. In this way, rejecting compliments can be a strategy against future shame. It reduces the stakes. It keeps expectations manageable. There is also the fear of being watched. Once someone labels you as capable or exceptional, you may feel observed more closely, and the spotlight brightens. And with brightness comes scrutiny. For a nervous system that associates visibility with judgment, praise can feel like exposure to evaluation. So you retreat slightly. You correct the narrative. You shrink the moment before it grows too large. Not because you do not appreciate kindness, but because you are trying to control the risk of failure. The irony is quiet. The compliment was meant to uplift, but it awakens the fear of falling. It was meant to affirm, but it activates the anxiety of expectation. And so you choose the safer route. You stay just beneath the height of praise, where mistakes feel less catastrophic, where the ground feels closer. Because in your experience, rising too high has always carried the danger of a harder descent. There is another layer beneath the discomfort, a quieter one, on the safety of self-criticism. It may seem strange to call self-criticism safe. It feels harsh, heavy, sometimes relentless. And yet, for many people, it has become familiar territory. When you criticize yourself first, you control the narrative. You expose your flaws before anyone else can. You lower the bar before someone else has the chance to lower it for you. It feels protective. If you say, "It was not that good," then no one can accuse you of arrogance. If you point out your own mistakes, then criticism from others feels less shocking. Self-deprecation becomes a shield, a way to stay one step ahead of disappointment. In this way, rejecting compliments maintains equilibrium. If someone praises you and you agree too easily, it can feel risky. What if they think you are full of yourself? What if admiration turns into envy? What if warmth turns into withdrawal? So you shrink yourself preemptively. You soften your edges. You make yourself smaller than the compliment suggests. It keeps you socially safe. Or at least, it feels that way. There is also the deeper belief that worth must be earned through struggle. If you have internalized the idea that you must always improve, always fix, always strive, then accepting praise feels like complacency. It feels like stopping, and stopping feels dangerous. So you return to self-correction. You return to what feels productive. Critical thoughts can create an illusion of control. They make you feel vigilant, prepared, responsible. Praise, on the other hand, requires surrender. It asks you to receive without fixing, to accept without editing, to let something good exist without immediately qualifying it. That surrender can feel unfamiliar, even threatening, especially if you learned early that humility meant invisibility, that staying small meant staying liked, that drawing attention to your strengths could lead to isolation. So you practice containment. You keep your light dim enough to avoid discomfort, not because you lack brightness, but because brightness has consequences in your memory. Self-criticism, in contrast, feels steady, predictable. It is a language you know how to speak. And so when someone offers a compliment, your instinct may not be to absorb it, but to balance it, to restore the internal scale back to familiar ground. It is not that you do not want kindness, it is that you have learned to survive through correction. And survival habits are slow to release. There are some lessons that are never spoken out loud. And no one gathers you in a room and says, "Make yourself smaller." No one formally announces that shrinking will keep you safe. And yet, somehow, you learn. You learn that being too confident can make others uncomfortable, that standing out can invite criticism, that shining too brightly can shift the mood in the room. So you adjust, not dramatically, just subtly enough to belong. In many cultures, humility is praised, modesty is admired, self-effacement is seen as grace, and humility, in its healthy form, is beautiful. But there is a quiet difference between humility and self-erasure. Humility allows you to know your strengths without needing to display them. Self-erasure convinces you that acknowledging your strengths is dangerous. For some, especially those socialized to be agreeable, nurturing, or accommodating, compliments can feel like stepping outside an invisible boundary. If you fully accept praise, will you seem arrogant? If you agree with the compliment, will you appear self-absorbed? If you shine, will others withdraw? Belonging is a powerful need, and sometimes belonging has required you to dim. Perhaps you were the gifted child who learned not to intimidate others, or the capable one who did not want to outshine a sibling, or the ambitious one who was told to be less intense, less loud, less visible. Over time, staying small became a relational strategy. You learned that it is safer to deflect praise than to sit comfortably inside it, safer to redirect attention than to hold it. Compliments disrupt that equilibrium. They invite expansion. They nudge you toward occupying more space than you are used to. And expansion can feel like betrayal. Betrayal of the version of you that kept everyone comfortable. Betrayal of the rules that once ensured acceptance. So you smile. You laugh it off. You return to neutral. Not because you do not value yourself, but because value, when visible, once came with social cost. The irony is quiet and profound. The very traits others admire in you may be the ones you have learned to conceal. The strength you downplay, the intelligence you soften, the beauty you question. Staying small was never about lacking light. It was about managing it, about keeping it at a level that felt safe in the rooms you once inhabited. But safety learned in one environment does not always serve you in another. And still, the body remembers. So when a compliment arrives, it brushes against those old lessons. And do not take up too much space. Do not be too much. Do not rise too high. And without realizing it, you obey. There is a subtle shift that happens when awareness begins. Not a dramatic transformation. Not a sudden surge of confidence. Just a quiet noticing. a pause between the compliment and the reflex to deflect it. Someone says, "That was impressive," and instead of immediately shrinking it, something inside you hesitates. You become aware of the familiar urge to minimize, the practiced response, the almost automatic correction. And in that small space, you see the pattern. Receiving without defending is not about forcing yourself to believe every compliment. It is not about inflating your ego or performing confidence. It is about tolerating the discomfort of being seen, and about allowing a positive perception to exist without immediately arguing with it. For many, the hardest part is not the compliment itself. It is the vulnerability of acceptance. Saying thank you can feel strangely exposed, as if you are stepping into a version of yourself that feels unfamiliar. When you accept praise without qualification, you allow the possibility that you are more than your inner critic claims. That possibility can feel destabilizing, but it can also feel expansive. There is a difference between arrogance and integration. Arrogance demands admiration to feel secure. Integration simply allows acknowledgement without resistance. When you stop defending against compliments, you are not claiming perfection. You are allowing complexity. You are allowing yourself to be flawed and capable, insecure and admirable, and growing and already enough in certain ways. The mind may still whisper doubts. It may question the sincerity. It may search for evidence against the praise. But awareness changes the relationship. Instead of automatically believing the critic, you notice it. Instead of immediately rejecting the compliment, you let it rest for a moment. This is not about changing your personality. It is about softening the reflex that equates praise with danger, the reflex that interprets visibility as risk. Over time, something subtle begins to shift. Compliments no longer feel like spotlights. They feel like reflections, not commands to perform, not contracts to uphold, just observations from another human perspective. And perspectives can coexist, yours and theirs. You do not have to abandon your humility to accept kindness. You do not have to silence your doubts to receive appreciation. You simply allow both to exist. The discomfort may not disappear instantly, but it becomes less threatening. Because you begin to understand that accepting a compliment does not trap you. It does not bind you to impossible expectations. It does not erase your humanity. It simply acknowledges a moment, and you are allowed to let that moment land. There is a quiet permission that begins to form when you stop fighting every kind word. Not a loud declaration, not a reinvention of who you are, just a softer stance toward yourself. For much of your life, being seen may have felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Exposure meant risk. Praise meant pressure. Visibility meant evaluation. So you learned to live slightly behind yourself. Present, but guarded. Capable, but cautious. Bright, but filtered. And yet, something changes when you realize that not all light burns. Some light warms. Some light simply reveals what has always been there. The ability, the effort, the care, the quiet strength you rarely name. Accepting a compliment does not mean rewriting your entire identity overnight. It means allowing a new detail to enter the picture. A small expansion of how you see yourself. You are not only your mistakes, not only your doubts, not only the voice that pushes you to improve. You are also the qualities others notice, the steadiness, the creativity, the resilience. Letting yourself be seen in this way can feel unfamiliar, almost tender, because it requires trust. Trust that appreciation does not automatically lead to abandonment. Trust that being valued does not guarantee future rejection. Trust that you can stand in your own light without losing connection. This trust grows slowly, like sediment settling in clear water. The more you allow kind words to rest without immediately disturbing them, the clearer your reflection becomes. You begin to understand that compliments are not verdicts. They are glimpses, not final judgments about who you must always be, but momentary recognitions of what is visible right now. And you are allowed to be visible. You are allowed to take up space without apology. You are allowed to hold both humility and worth in the same breath. If parts of this reflection felt familiar, if something quiet inside you felt understood, then you are not alone in this experience. Many people carry this silent tension between how they see themselves and how they are seen. And if you would like to stay connected to this kind of space, a place where the hidden corners of the human heart are explored gently and without judgment, you are welcome to subscribe. And if you feel comfortable sharing your thoughts in the comments, your words may help someone else realize they are not alone either. There is no pressure, only invitation. Music. Take care of yourself. You deserve gentleness.